used to think the smartest way to survive New Orleans nights was to keep my head down, wipe up the spill, and clock out before the band finished their second encore. That was the rule. Be invisible. Stay paid. Keep Mom's meds refilled. But then a Friday storm dragged the river air straight through the Garden District and into St. Cecile, and everything changed faster than the rain could find the cracks in our roof. You know how a room sounds when the song dies wrong? Not a clean cut, not applause, just a trumpet note that falls off a cliff. That's what it sounded like backstage when Dante Rios stumbled into a lighting case, grabbed the edge like it was the last other thing in the world, and rasped. Don't. Air. His fingers pressed at the base of his throat. Eyes glassy. Pupils not quite right. People like me didn't exist to men like him. Until we did. The neon alligator over the door buzzed like it had a fever. And somewhere out front, a tourist slurred an order for hurricanes like it was a prayer. I was mopping behind the curtain where the wood stays sticky even when it looks clean. I could feel the storm pushing its weight through the back door, humid and mean, making the linen closet smell like pennies and bleach. Hey, ghost girl. That's what the sound guy called me, because I slip in and out with a mop and a bucket and nobody remembers my face. He said it tonight too. Half joking, half rude. I swallowed it like always. But when Dante's knees shook and his hand flattened on a road case, I dropped the mop and crossed the tape line you're not supposed to cross. Don't touch him, Theo said. The one on payroll to hover near Dante without being obvious. His jacket hid a piece, and his eyes said trouble. Call 911. I should have. The poster near the time clock says to call every time. But the red camera light in the hallway, usually blinking, was dead. And the liquor cage lock was turned upside down, like someone who had a key had been in a hurry. I'd noticed the badge color on the new janitor cart was wrong too. Monday badges are blue. Someone slapped on green. I thought I was being paranoid. I thought overthinking was a luxury for people who sleep. What I didn't expect was that every little off note lined up to this moment. I knelt anyway, slow and clear, hands where Theo could see them. He's not choking, I said, keeping my voice low like you talk to a skittish dog. He's losing airway from the inside. Pulse is floating, skin's clammy, breath shallow. The room smelled like brass polish and spilled rye. Dante's pulse fluttered like a trapped moth against my fingertips. He tried again. One syllable punched between his teeth. Horn, case. I heard it because I was inches from his mouth and because I've learned to listen for the thing no one else hears. Horn, case, amber. He pushed, and I watched his gaze flick toward the backline locker, like he'd trained himself to look away from where a real man hides a fire extinguisher. 30 seconds, Theo warned, tension carving hollows in his jaw. You do anything stupid and if I'm right. He's got a window. If I'm wrong, you can drag me out. Your call, I said, already moving. I'm not a doctor. I didn't finish nursing school because a stroke took my mother's right side and our savings with it. But muscle memory doesn't care why you had to quit. It remembers how to count breaths and what discoloration means, and that some poisons don't announce themselves until the world tilts. The backline locker was crammed with cables and cases stenciled with bands that came through town and left their stickers like tattoos. There it was, a battered trumpet case with 2 strips of athletic tape over the handle and R slashed in Sharpie. I popped it, ignoring the way my hands shook in the thunder's afterbeat. Beneath a velvet mouthpiece pouch sat a small metal tin that wasn't part of any horn kit I've ever cleaned. Inside the tin, tucked in foam, cut by someone who thinks 5 steps ahead, was an ampoule, the color of whiskey, caught in late sun, and a single syringe sealed in sterile wrap. People like Dante don't survive this long without preparing for betrayal. People like me don't survive this long without learning how to read that kind of preparation. I know what you think, Theo hissed. Closer now, the room tighter, the neon buzz louder. You think you're the hero. You think I think. He needs this intramuscular, deltoid or thigh, now, I said, ripping the seal with my teeth because my fingers wouldn't cooperate, checking the glass for cracks, the liquid for clouding. the plunger for stick. And I think the camera being accidentally dead means whoever did this will be back if we make too much noise. I flicked the barrel, drew exactly what the ampoule would give, pressed the fresh alcohol pad where muscle would take it fast, and met Dante's eyes. "You with me?" His nod was a fraction. It was enough. The needle went in smooth, my other hand counting, my breath counting with it, because sometimes you need your body to believe the numbers. It's a simple choreography, really. Stabilize, monitor, wait, be ready to push more air if the body can't remember how. I kept talking, not because Dante needed my voice, but because I did. "Stay with me, Mr. Rios. Focus on the sound booth light, not the thunder." I told him about my mom and the way she hums old hymns on good days. I told him about a second line parade that blocked my bus last week and how the trombone player winked at a dog. It's the kind of chatter that keeps a nervous system from falling straight down an elevator shaft. His breathing steadied by inches, not miracles. The gray washed out of his lips. He blinked like the room was unfreezing. And then he was looking at me, not through me. "Who are you?" Not suspicious, exactly. Something closer to curious. Like he'd never seen me before, even though I've mopped past his stems and shadows 100 nights. "Maintenance," I said. "Night shift." It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole. I felt the old heat rise, being shrugged past, being called ghost girl, being told to keep to women's work. I swallowed it and set the needle in the sharps box that should have been mounted to the wall and wasn't. Another note out of place. He tried to sit. Theo hovered, torn between protecting him and throwing me out. "Sit slow," I said. "If you stand too fast, you'll faceplant, and I'm not mopping up your concussion." A thin smile ghosted across his mouth, like he couldn't help it. Stormlight flickered in the exit sign, and the neon gator blinked out, then back. The red camera light stayed dead. "I used to think, if I minded my business, the city would mind me back," I said, and I wasn't sure if I was talking to him or to myself. "But somebody turned your cameras off and swapped out a badge color on a janitor cart. That's either a sloppy coincidence or a message. I don't like coincidences." Dante watched me the way men like him watch rivals, quiet, measuring. When he spoke, his voice had gravel but no tremor. "What do you want?" "Not thanks, not a payout offer, a contract. That's how you talk when life is just a series of deals that keep you breathing." "2 things," I said, before I could talk myself out of it. "Protection for my mother, starting tonight. No cops, no noise, just safe. And the truth about who has a key to that liquor cage and why your hallway camera is blind." I thought I sounded braver than I felt. My heart thudded like the kick drum from the band's last set. Theo exhaled like a tire losing air. "You're out of line." "Maybe," I said, standing because if I stayed on my knees, I was going to shake, and I didn't want them to see it. "But if I hadn't been out of line, he'd be on the floor." I paused, then added, "Because the city taught me to make it plain. I'm not your fixer. I'm not your problem either. I'm the person who saw what everyone else ignored." From the doorway, a shadow moved. Ray, the old trumpet player who warms up for the kids on Wednesdays, peeked in, eyes sharp despite the years. He tipped his cap at me like I'd finally played the right note. "Kid knows what she's done," he said to Theo. "Not to me. Give her a lane." It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Sometimes the person you don't expect to speak up is the one who cracks the door you didn't know you were beating on. Dante's gaze flicked to the dead camera light, to the liquor cage lock. Back to me. The storm pressed harder, low thunder rolling over the river like a dare. "Get her mother safe," he told Theo, each word a decision. Then, to me, "and find out who turned my eyes off." I thought keeping my head down would save me. What I didn't expect was that one choice in a hot, humming backstage room would pull me up into the light, where every good deed casts a shadow, and every shadow has a name. The morning after felt like the city had put a wet towel over its own face. Humid. Heavy. Slow to breathe. I grabbed a coffee from the corner store that sells Scratch. Off's next to bleach and motor oil. then rode the St. Charles line, sitting behind a man in a saint's cap who argued with his phone like it owed him rent. I kept replaying the dead camera light and the upside. Down liquor cage lock, like a loop I couldn't exit. I used to think the safest move was to let weird stuff slide, don't poke the alligator. Cross the street. Keep walking. But after last night, the only way out was straight through. And believe me, I wanted out. Me and my mother both. When Eva called, I almost didn't pick up, because unknown numbers mean bills or bad news. Mara, it's Eva from the clinic. Theo said to expect you. Your mom's transfer is set for noon. No police, no paperwork circus, just a quiet van, an inn, house nurse, and a room that doesn't face the dumpster. I didn't realize I'd been holding that much air until it left me. I said thank you, like a person who doesn't want to cry in public, then got off 2 stops early to buy my mother her favorite lemon drops, even though she might forget them by dinner. Small mercies still count. Back at St. Cecile before the lunch shift, the place smelled like last night's beer and old wood. Ray, the trumpet player with lungs like sugarcane and rust, was polishing his horn at a table he claims is luckier than the others. He tilted his head at me. "You look like you've been up arguing with ghosts," he said. "Tell them to pay rent or move along." It made me smile, even as my stomach tightened. Theo met me by the sound booth with the kind of face that says, "I'm not thrilled, but I'm here." "Boss is resting. You've got a short leash," he said, handing me a temporary badge that beeped the wrong tone when I tested it on the staff door. I logged that. Not as a complaint, just another note in the song. "I'm not here to redecorate your kingdom," I told him. "I'm here to figure out who turned off your eyes." He watched me like he was expecting me to trip. I didn't. I asked for the janitorial inventory logs, the vendor invoices for supplies, and the access pings for the back hallway the hour before Dante went down. He blinked once and called someone and made it happen. I spread everything out in the back office that still had a Katrina waterline scar behind the filing cabinet. The logs were neat where they should have been messy, and messy where they should have been neat. A classic tell. Monday badges are blue. Yesterday, I saw a green tag on a cart parked where it didn't belong. The vendor invoice listed a citrus degreaser we never use here because it fights with beer smell and makes the whole place smell like pledge. The storeroom showed 2 cartons missing anyway. The buffer had scuffed the dance floor in a pattern that said it ran clockwise when every night guy runs counter because of how the stage legs stick out. That's not CSI. That's living a life where you notice things because nobody else will fix them for you. I laid a piece of clear tape across the bottom of the service door, an angle you only catch if you're looking. I dusted baking soda in a thin line along the mop sink and across the threshold to the liquor cage, just enough to kiss the floor so I could read wheel tracks later. I balanced a quarter on its edge, inside the sound booth door jamb. Old trick the night manager at the hospital taught me to catch petty thieves and bored interns. Cheap alarms for a place that can't afford to feel safe. When the access log came, I traced the pings with my finger, like a kid, following a maze on a placemat at Waffle House. The hallway camera went offline, maintenance, at 10:42 p.m. and back at 12:08 a.m., which would be a decent alibi, if not for the fact that the maintenance ticket number attached belonged to the finance office, not facilities. I don't know everybody's names. I do know numbers. This one ended in 4172. I wrote it on a sticky note and underlined it twice. Theo hovered. "You think numbers are going to tell you who tried to kill him?" he asked, skeptical, like maybe I'd say crystals and vibes next. "I think habits will," I said. "People are lazy, even when they're smart. They use shortcuts they shouldn't. They reuse codes. They pick the wrong cart because it's closer. They rehang a lock upside down because their hands are shaking. And they tell themselves no one will notice because no one ever does." He chewed on that like a stubborn dog with a bone he doesn't want to admit tastes good. I took a lap the way I always do, pretending to check trash cans so staff didn't get twitchy. Nico, a dishwasher from the 9th Ward, with beats leaking from one earbud and a work ethic that shames grown men, nodded at me. "Yo, Ms. M, that beer guy was back late last night. Said he forgot the scanner. Asked me to hold the side door. I told him, company policy. Get the supervisor." He rolled his eyes and called somebody. Said, "Your CFO already okayed it." He shrugged. "I don't know what CFO means. Fancy boss?" That word sat in my gut like a stone. I didn't leap. Leaping gets you dead. I just asked what time. He told me. It lined up too nicely with the maintenance ticket. You can call that coincidence. I don't. I checked on Dante last, because it was easier to be brave when he wasn't looking at me like a person who mattered. He was propped against the leather in the upstairs office that tried too hard, sipping water like he didn't trust it yet. He looked better. Color back. Eyes clear. The edge of a temper he kept on a tight leash. "How's your mother?" he asked. And it wasn't small talk. "Van's on the way at noon," I said. "Thank you." The words tasted weird in my mouth. He set the water down and studied me the way men study a map before a bad road. "You didn't call 911, he said. Not accusing, just stating the thing we both knew. Camera was dead. Cage was jimmied. Either we had a problem inside or the city decided to play a practical joke on you. I didn't want the wrong people arriving with the right uniforms," I said. He nodded once, like a coin dropping. "Find me the who," he said, "and I'll handle the why." That told me everything and nothing. It told me he's used to dealing with symptoms by cutting out organs. It told me he was trying not to be that man. Before lunch, I set the shadow shift. I swapped the bathroom signs, men for women, only in the back hallway to see who yanks the handle. Because muscle memory beats literacy every time. I reset the liquor cage lock right, side up, and traced a hair. Thin line of clear nail polish where the hasp meets the plate, so I'd know if someone fiddled with it. I moved the green, tagged cart 2 bays down, and taped a tiny X of painter's tape under its lower shelf where a wheel would scrape it off if pushed hard. Low, tech, petty, effective. By the time the band started their sound check, I had more notes than I had places to hide them. At 11:57, I rode with my mother in the quiet van. She laughed at nothing and hummed an old hymn and asked me if I'd eaten. I told her yes, even though coffee doesn't count. The new facility smelled like bread and bleach instead of sorrow. Ava met us in scrubs, even though she's a lawyer, because she's the kind of person who tells a building what it's going to be by acting like it's already that. "You did good," she told me in a voice that didn't put me on a scale. "You're allowed to let somebody else drive for a minute." I wanted to argue. I didn't. On the way out, I saw a small medal by the reception candy dish. Saint Jude, patron of lost causes. Same saint as Dante's pendant. Different chain. I took that as the city's way of saying it sees me. Maybe I'm superstitious. Maybe I've earned it. Back at St. Cecile, the baking soda line by the mop sink had a faint ribbon through it, the width of a cartwheel. The painter's tape under the green cart shelf was gone. The quarter at the booth door lay flat like it had been flicked by someone impatient. The liquor cage lock glistened where my nail polish had been smudged. In the access log, 4172 pinged again, 5 minutes after I left for the van. Theo read over my shoulder and didn't say coincidence. He didn't have to. Word had run out of excuses. "Okay," he said, jaw set. "Now what?" I tucked the sticky note with the number into the pocket with my mother's lemon drops and felt both truths pressing together. Fear and purpose. Soft and sharp. "Now," I said. We stop being polite and we get very, very specific. I used to think rich people parties were all the same. Cold shrimp, warm speeches, somebody in a tux thanking our generous partners while the rest of us refill glasses and pretend we don't hear the backhanded comments. Masks for the bayou, tried to be cute with the theme. Feathers and beads and a brass band on a riser. But the room still smelled like money and insecurity. Theo got me in a caterer's jacket with a name tag that said Marie. And Eva pinned a button mic under my collar so delicate I was scared to breathe wrong. 1. Party consent. Within policy, keep it conversational, she murmured. Lawyer calm. Dante didn't give a pep talk. He just looked me in the eye for 2 seconds that felt longer and said, "If you feel unsafe, walk. I'll take the noise." It was the kind of permission nobody ever gave me. Permission to leave. I tucked that in my pocket, next to the lemon drops I'd started carrying for when my hands needed something to do besides shake. New Orleans knows how to dress a wound pretty. Chandeliers threw rainbows on marble, while a silent auction table sold a signed Saints jersey next to a basket of artisanal hot sauce. The band slid into "Do You Know What It Means?" and the room answered with laughter that didn't reach eyes. I kept mooing, tray up, head down, ears open. Kellen Ward was easy to spot even in a half mask. Tailored suit, slick hair, watch trying too hard. He had the walk of a man who believes hallways open for him. He said, CFO, like a rank you salute. I caught him by the ceviche, like I was born there. Top off? I asked. Soft, like I wasn't setting anything on fire. He turned. Did the quick inventory men like him do? Face, badge, usefulness. Sure, he said. Then to his friend, we finally got operations to stop bleeding from spill shrink. New protocols. He said it the way people say, we installed a new espresso machine. I let the champagne tilt just enough to make him feel tended. Is that why the maintenance ticket for 172 got rerouted from facilities to finance? I asked, like I was gossiping about printer codes. His smile glitched, fast as a bad frame in a film. Who are you with? He asked, a little sharp under the silk. Vendor Cross. Check, I said, wide-eyed and harmless. They told me the citrus degreaser was cleared for closed spaces now, but the night guy says it makes the whole place smell like pledge and headaches. That earned a laugh from his friend, the kind people do when they want to be on the right side of a joke. Kellen leaned in, cologne expensive enough to make my eyes water. Tell your night guy to read the memo, he said. We had to get creative to bring compliance in line. Sometimes you move a ticket to move a person. He looked pleased with himself, like he'd said a riddle. I nodded like I understood less than I did. Right, because the hallway camera was down for maintenance, exactly when the delivery needed a sign. Off. I said it like I was complaining about timing, not accusing anyone of anything. He tapped his watch. Nothing exactly about this city, he said, but his eyes slid, the way guilty eyes do, toward the back corridor. Anyway, it's fixed. That should have been his stop sign. He blew past it. The cart should have had a blue tag, Monday, I added, like a dummy eager to please. But the new guy came in with green. Kellen's jaw ticked. You're overthinking plastic. He reached for a canapé he didn't want. People are sloppy. I compensate. He glanced at my tray like he wished it were a mirror. Make sure the VIP tables get more champagne. The boss likes his crowd generous. Ray saved me without meaning to, sliding a horn line over the room that turned faces toward the riser. He caught my eye and tilted his trumpet like a hello. A small nod steadied me. Miss Laverne from the catering staff, tight bun, tighter standards, bumped my elbow on purpose and muttered, back hallway, sugar, less ears. I followed the note in her voice to the corridor where donors disappear to make calls they don't want recorded on the main floor. Kellen peeled off 2 minutes later, because men like him can't resist a comfortable corner. He didn't clock that I was the same server. Masks make all of us interchangeable if you want us to be. I need a quick sign. Off, I said, flipping open a leather folio I borrowed from the bar. Blank paper inside like a stage set. Operations wants confirmation that the camera downtime was covered under finance because of insurance. You know how auditors get. He smirked. Auditors don't come to parties. He took the pen anyway, habit, and scribbled the signature that matched the one on vendor invoices I'd studied until my eyes crossed. There. Tell whoever's nervous to take a Xanax. He didn't hand the pen back. He rolled it between his fingers, enjoying the weight of being the guy who fixes things by saying words. You're new, he said. Where'd Dante dig you up? I could have said the truth, that I came up from a mop bucket and a mother who forgets my face on bad days. I could have said nothing. Charity hospital, I said instead, because it was true enough in another life. Nursing program. His smile went cruel the way some smiles do, slow and practiced. Didn't finish, he said, pity in his voice. like a thumb on a bruise. Shame. Could have done better than this. He gestured at the tray like it was evidence. That's when the universe decided to cut in. A woman with gray curls and a seersucker blazer stopped, looked at me hard, and said, "Aren't you the Quinn girl from that Times Picayune piece? You pulled a kid off the streetcar tracks last summer when his mama fainted. I wanted the floor to swallow me and to stand taller at the same time. You made my mother cry happy," she added, like a benediction, then drifted back into the crowd like she hadn't just changed the temperature in the hall. Kellen's eyes narrowed. He recalculated me in real time and didn't like the math. People like that hate when the help has a story. "You really think playing hero buys you a seat?" he asked, keeping his voice low so it stayed pretty. "Seats are for people who can pay for the table." There it was, the thing under the cologne. I let the insult pass me like a cold front. "I think it buys me the right to ask why someone used finance to mask a facilities outage," I said, still polite. "And why a vendor was told the CFO already okayed a late load. In at a door that needs a supervisor." I sound braver in hindsight. In the moment, my mouth was dry enough to strike a match on. He leaned so close the mic under my collar could have counted his heartbeats. "Because some of us understand risk," he said. "Because some of us know that you can't run a city like this on trust and good intentions." His voice warmed as he went, like he was giving a TED talk to my throat. "If a hallway goes dark for an hour so I can keep a balance sheet from bleeding, that's stewardship." He was performing for himself, drunk on his own efficiency. "And if a certain man has a certain episode that reveals whether he's as untouchable as he sells, well, knowledge is leverage." He smiled in a way that made me think of a gator sunning on a bank. Honestly, the only surprise is he had a countermeasure. I didn't peg him for forward thinking. He thought he'd named nothing. He'd named everything. The band hit a hot break and someone whooped by the bar. The noise swallowed my flinch. I kept my tray steady. "So you did know about the cart?" I said, a shade too flat. He heard it. Predators hear tone. "Careful," he said gently, like a warning dressed as a favor. "This town eats girls who ask the wrong questions." I thought of my mother in her new room, of lemon drops and hymns and a medal by a candy dish. I thought of Dante on a floor, breathing glass and lightning. I thought of every time I'd been called Ghost Girl and said nothing. "Then it can choke," I said, just quiet enough that he had to lean closer to be sure he'd heard. He opened his mouth to make a promise I didn't want and didn't fear. And that's when Theo appeared like a door that wasn't there a second ago. "Mr. Ward?" Theo said, bland as beige paint. "Boss is asking for you. Something about the donor ledger." Kellen smoothed his jacket with both hands like he was erasing fingerprints. "Of course," he said, to me, softer. "Next time you want to play auditor, bring a calculator." He walked away with the confidence of a man who thinks the room belongs to him. He didn't notice Miss Laverne slip me a folded napkin as she passed. Inside was a tiny SD card I hadn't given to anyone yet. The mic had been pushing to my phone the whole time. Time, stamped, clean. "Extra copy," she whispered without moving her mouth. "Men burn things. Women keep receipts." I found Eva by the silent auction under a print of Bayou Cypress knees. We didn't hug. We aren't that kind of friends. I pressed the napkin into her hand like I was trading nothing bigger than a cough drop. Her phone buzzed once against her wrist, the way it does when our files handshake. She didn't smile. She doesn't when it matters. "Walk away like you spilled," she said, and I tilted my tray to sell it. A little champagne fizzing over the lip like the room had made me clumsy. Dante stood by the far window, his face a mask. People pay to learn and never master. He didn't nod. He didn't have to. The air around him felt a degree lighter, like the storm outside had decided to rain somewhere else for a change. On my way back to this kitchen, a donor in pearls touched my sleeve and said, "Sweetheart, more bubbles?" I said, sure and poured like my hands had never done anything else. Inside my chest, something unclenched. I used to think being invisible kept me safe. What I didn't expect was how loud it feels when the right person finally hears you, and the wrong person hears themselves telling on themselves into your collar. We weren't done. But for the first time, I could see the edge of the table where people like me never get a seat, and I could see my own chair being built, one recorded sentence at a time. I used to think danger made noise. Sirens, yelling, glass breaking. Turns out it can smell like a nail salon, amplified by a bad idea. The first hint was a sting in the back hallway that made my eyes water and my tongue go numb on the edges. The second was the painter's tape X I'd hidden under the green. Tagged cart, gone. The third was the quarter I'd balanced in the sound booth door jamb lying flat like someone flicked it with two bored fingers. I didn't make a speech. I walked straight to the service panel and hit the air handler kill for the back corridor, then told the new bartender to stop pouring and get the front doors propped. Now. He started to argue, then saw my face and moved like he'd remembered his mama taught him manners. The room didn't know yet, but the night had already turned. Theo met me halfway down the corridor, shirt sleeves rolled, jaw set. "You smell that?" I asked. Strong solvent. Wrong place. He sniffed once and swore under his breath. "Maintenance," he said into his mic, even though we both knew this wasn't maintenance. Behind him, Miss Laverne was already herding the kitchen crew toward the alley like a general with a spatula. Ray put his trumpet to his lips and blew a single clear note that cut through the chatter out front. Old Saint Cecile signal for wrap it up. Back from when the fire code was a rumor. Folks laughed, then saw our faces and stood. New Orleans can read a room. It's just usually too polite to do it fast. Tonight it learned fast. The cart sat by the mop sink like it had always belonged. Only the citrus degreaser under the top shelf had a second bottle behind it with a label I didn't recognize. Cap loose. Someone had wanted a leak. My head throbbed in a tight halo. I turned the faucet and ran water until the smell backed up a step and stopped trying to live in my lungs. "Whoever did this knew your schedule," I said, and Theo's eyes hardened at the thought of a mole. He started for the office. I caught his sleeve. "People first." He didn't like it. He nodded anyway. Dante came down the stairs too fast, color a shade paler, anger contained, but not caged. "You pulled the air?" he asked. "Had to," I said. "We're evacuating." He shot a look toward the stage, like gravity lived in that direction. I knew, before he spoke, what he was thinking. The old PA speaker with the loose back panel in the wings. The one that hid a hardware wallet and a drive marked R in Sharpie. The kind of future a man like him doesn't say out loud, because saying it might kill it. "I need 60 seconds, he said. "No," I said, before I could make it pretty. "You need everyone out." He stared at me like he was listening for the trick. "If that cloud moves into the main room and someone has a bad airway, we're dragging bodies," I said softly. "You asked me to keep you breathing. I'm asking you to keep them breathing." For a second, he looked like a man strapped to two directions. Then he thumbed his comm. "All security. Clear the floor," he said. No bark, just steel. He didn't look back at the stage again. That's what choice looks like in real time. It doesn't get a soundtrack. We moved like we drilled it, even though we hadn't. Kitchen out the alley to the parking lot. Front. Of house out St. Charles in little clusters, so the sidewalk didn't turn into a stampede. Someone started to complain about their bar tab until Miss Laverne gave them a look that could salt a driveway, and they remembered their legs. The band grabbed horns and cymbals like babies and ran. Ray pressed a handkerchief to his mouth and kept blowing the same calm note every 10 seconds, like a lighthouse. The smell hit harder near the service door, sweet and sharp, wrong enough to scare you, even if you didn't know why. I kept my head low and my breath short, like they taught us in lab when someone drops a bottle. I did quiet math. How many people? How many doors? How many steps to the alley if someone went down? In the middle of it, a kid from Dish, Nico, coughed so hard he bent in half. I handed him my lemon drops and said, "Suck on one and walk." He did like we'd rehearsed it. Little things save people more than speeches. On the sidewalk, a tourist asked if it was a drill. Theo said yes, because panic kills faster than any solvent. Eva showed up with a calm I wanted to steal, phone in one hand, clipboard in the other, even though I don't think she'd planned to wear either with her dress. "The clinic's 2 blocks over," she said. "Anyone lightheaded sits there. No sirens." She was a lawyer, cosplaying an EMT and somehow making both worlds behave. Backstage went quiet, in a way rooms do when they've been emptied of things that breathe. That's when the other shoe dropped. The access log on my phone pinged. 4172. Again. Not the hallway camera this time. The office. I tasted metal. "They use the smoke to pull bodies to the street," I said. "Second team hits the paper." Theo swore louder. Already moving. I caught him again, harder. "Look at me," I said. "If you charge that door and it's not them, but something worse, this gets stupid fast." He scanned my face. The corner. The floor. He remembered the hair. Thin line of clear polish I'd painted on the liquor lock. It was smeared. He took a breath. "Okay," he said. "We do it clean." We didn't have time to get clever. We had time to get decisive. I punched the fire suppression manual trip in the office doorway and watched white foam bloom across the desk. The shelves. Dante's old red folders. Anything paper that thought it might hold a past. The hiss filled my ears and gave my hands something to do that wasn't shaking. It was messy and it was expensive, and it meant we'd be here all night with shop vacs. But it also meant that if someone was trying to walk out with anything that could put a bullet in the future, it would be slop. Theo looked like I'd thrown a drink in his face, and then like maybe it had been water and not whiskey. He started. "We can recreate honest books," I said, throat tight. "We can't rebuild a life if this goes sideways." Dante reached us as the foam settled into drifts. He took in the room and what I'd done and the thing he didn't do. He didn't yell. He put his hands on the back of a chair and held it like an anchor while a part of his jaw worked through anger into something bigger. "That hardware wallet," he said quietly. "Stage wing," I said. I didn't grab it. "Neither did I," he said. And there it was, the admission and the decision braided into one. He looked at the foam swallowing names and numbers he'd kept for years, maybe as protection, maybe as shackles. "Let it go," he said to the room. But it was for himself, too. The fire alarm gave a late, ugly bleat. Someone finally noticing the suppression dump and doing their job a beat too slow. Outside, blue lights did that soft spin that makes neighbors come to the porch. We didn't wait for uniforms to tell our story. They got the solvent leak, the evacuation, the everything's fine now speech that keeps a report tidy. Eva took 3 names and 2 statements and left out the parts about maintenance tickets and CFOs because you save your bullets for the target. Ray stood with his horn case like a sleeping dog and winked at me when no one else could see. Miss Laverne passed out water and guilt in equal measure. The band argued about set lists, like arguing could push the night back where it belonged. When it was only us again, the room smelled like fake snow and old paper. Dante picked up one of the ruined red folders and squeezed it until foam ran out like toothpaste. He looked at me like a man trying on a new pair of shoes that might be his size, but not his style yet. "We just made a choice," he said. "We did," I said. I didn't pretend it didn't scare me. He pulled the Saint Jude medal from under his shirt and rubbed his thumb over it like a habit he'd been hiding. I hadn't noticed before how worn the edges were. "I used to think keeping records made me safe," he said. "Insurance. Insurance is only good if the company pays," I said. Tonight they weren't going to. We stood in the foam, and the failure, and the relief. My head hurt less. The air felt cleaner, even with the mess in it. Somewhere, a train horn talked to the river. I thought of my mother, tucked into a room that faced trees instead of a dumpster. Of lemon drops by her bed. Of a woman in a seersucker blazer calling me the Quinn girl like it meant I was somebody. I thought of a napkin with a tiny SD card and Eva's steady wrist. We still had the tape. We still had a room full of people alive. We still had a chance to make a different kind of ledger. One that didn't require a lock. What I didn't expect was how light it would feel to watch the past turn to mush and know I hadn't made a mistake. That's the part nobody tells you, the relief when you pick people and it doesn't destroy you. Outside, the city steamed under streetlights like it was drying off from a fight. Inside, Dante exhaled the kind of breath a man saves for when he lets go of something heavy. "Okay," he said, looking at me like I'd become a fact in his life, not a variable. "We do this another way." And for the first time, I believed him. Bywater didn't look like a safe house. It looked like a shotgun duplex that lost an argument with a paint catalog. Pistachio on the front and mustard on the side. Porch sagging just enough to talk back when you stepped on it. Theo called it a holding pattern and parked 2 blocks away, like paranoia was a hobby. Inside smelled like old vinyl and lemon oil. Saint's pennants fading on the wall. Window unit grinding like it had beef with summer. Dante moved like a man who'd set a heavy bag down but wasn't sure if it would roll back onto his feet. Phone face down on the table. Saint Jude metal warm against his collarbone, where his thumb kept finding it when his brain got loud. I microwaved leftover red beans in a plastic container that had seen better days and worse nights, and the steam felt like real food and a truce. We didn't talk strategy first. We did ordinary. I texted the nurse at my mom's new place and got a video of her watching Wheel of Fortune with the sound off, humming a hymn that only made sense to her. She waved at the camera like she was blessing it. I showed Dante, and he watched the whole clip like it owed him nothing, and he was grateful anyway. When he finally spoke, he didn't pitch me a plan like a deck. He told me a story about his mother's porch on Chartres, where she took blood pressure for half the block with a cuff from the Rite Aid and a notebook with everyone's numbers. "I thought it was nothing," he said, looking at his hands. "A poor person's clinic before dinner. Now I think it was a map I didn't read right." I told him I used to chart vitals in a notebook like that too, until the bills ate my pencils. We weren't flirting. We were putting down bricks. He pulled a yellow legal pad from a drawer and set it between us like a peace offering. "Write it," he said. "Your rules." I laughed because that's not a thing men like him say. Except he had, and he meant it. So I wrote. Not pretty, not legalese, just the bones. No first strikes. Ever. No lies to me. Not even the flattering kind. My mother stays first. Always. If I say we walk, we walk. If you go back on any of this, I go back to invisible and you don't come looking. I added one more line that burned coming out. Anything we build has to outlive our worst day. He read each line like he was learning a new alphabet and didn't want to get the letters wrong. "I can do these," he said. And I believed him until I didn't. And then I chose to anyway. I signed with my whole name like I used to on clinicals, and he signed with the same steady hand he used to move numbers, and slid the pad to the side and reached for his medal again. I've been watching it for days. How he thumbed a groove that shouldn't exist on a piece of silver, that small. "It's gonna bug me if I don't ask," I said. "Does that thing have a trick?" He hesitated, then handed it to me. There was a seam fine as a hair around the edge if you looked at it dead on. I pressed where the Jude stamp made a halo, and the back popped like a locket. Inside was a microcard the size of a crumb, and a paper sliver folded twice. A handwriting so neat it made me want to sit up straight. He didn't explain. He watched to see what I would do. I didn't open the paper. I put the card back and closed the metal with a click that sounded louder than it should. "We open it when you're ready to be the man who doesn't need what's on there to sleep," I said. I don't know where that sentence came from. Maybe from the clinic. Maybe from the foam in the office. He breathed out through his nose like a laugh that had been told to behave, then nodded once. Not grateful, not relieved. Something like respect that had found a chair. After we ate, we went to work on the not glamorous. I drew out a safety workflow on the back of a takeout menu. Air handlers mapped. Manual kills labeled. Where to stage people if a room turns bad. A go. Bag list that didn't include cash, because cash makes men stupid. Eva came by with folders that smelled like a copy shop and hard candy in her bag. Hair up. Courtroom calm in a thrift store. Shirt. "You want legitimacy fast?" she said. "You cede what you say you will, and you put your name on only the part you can defend when a microphone finds you." She slid over the shell papers for a community care fund. Not in his name. Not in mine. In nobody's name that matters to gossip yet. With bylaws that read like a promise. Quinn Fund scholarships. 2 nursing students this fall. 4 next year if we don't drown. My hands shook worse signing that than they had holding a needle. I thought about the kid on the streetcar tracks, about the woman in the seersucker blazer calling me the Quinn girl, and I let myself picture a student with a backpack and no second job taking vitals like they mattered and getting to keep going when life throws a wrench. Ray texted me a contact for a retired fire chief who consults for bars and music venues for cheap if you bring him boudin balls and the respect he's owed. Miss Laverne dropped off a spiral notebook from under the register at St. Cecile. Years of we almost messed up entries from shifts before me. A low, tech black box. "Read it," she said, tapping the cover. "So you don't step in the same hole we already filled." It wasn't all soft edges. Theo didn't sign our contract. He's not built for paper promises. He did take a photo of the badge number I'd circled and said, "Give me a day," in a voice like concrete. He hates that I have a lane. He also held the porch door open when I carried cleaning supplies in, like he was bracing the house. Late afternoon, the bell on the corner taqueria rang, and a kid I'd seen sketching sneakers on a pizza box stopped at our steps and said, "Saw the evacuation last night on a friend's live." "You did that?" I said we all did. He nodded like he was filing it under "maybe the grown-ups aren't hopeless," then offered me a sticker he designed, a tiny drawing of a trumpet with a band. "8 on it." I stuck it to the legal pad on the rule page. Dante watched me do it and didn't make a joke. He turned the TV to mute, and we sat there listening to cicadas and a neighbor's radio calling in about the Saints draft, like it could change his whole year. I let the quiet stretch until it felt like something you get to keep. And that night I walked the block alone to check my head, because sometimes you have to hear your feet talk without an audience. Bywater does that eerie, friendly thing after dark, where porch lights sketch out little islands of safety, and the spaces between feel like questions. I passed a corner store that sells Powerball dreams and pickles in bags, and the clerk held up a hand like we were kin. I used to think safety was a door you lock. Now, I think it's a set of choices you make with other people. And if one of you quits, it collapses. Back on the porch, I found the legal pad where we'd left it and wrote one more line. If we have to choose, we choose people over paper. I underlined it once. Dante came out with 2 mugs of coffee. He didn't know how to sweeten right and sat without asking what I'd added. He didn't reach for the medal. He didn't reach for his phone. He just looked at me like he was learning the art of staying. I used to think trust was a cliff you jump off. Tonight it felt like steps you build. 1, 2, by 4 at a time. Loud, crooked, real. Still standing in the morning. The package came at noon, wrapped like truce. White ribbon. No return address. A little card that said, "We're done," in a font that belongs on wedding invites. Theo didn't let it cross the threshold until he weighed it, scanned it, and swabbed it like we were at TSA. Inside sat a cedar cigar box with an old New Orleans label that smelled like a man trying to buy forgiveness. On the velvet lay a hardware wallet and a note in Kellen's tidy hand. "In case you misplaced your conscience." Dante didn't laugh. He didn't take the bait either. He just looked at me, and the look said, "Tell me the part I don't want to hear." So I did. The wallet serial didn't match the scuffed one hidden in our busted PA back at St. Cecile. This one was showroom clean, and somehow already loaded with transfers, naming shell entities that spelled out DR, if you squinted. And I don't believe in coincidence that cute. The metadata screamed plant. You don't get creation timestamps from 3 months ago on a device that was manufactured 6 weeks ago unless someone wants a story to write itself. I used to think evil wore a black hat. Turns out it wears a perfect Windsor knot and thinks version control is for other people. We didn't fight about opening the Saint Jude medal. There wasn't time for pride. Dante held it out, and I popped the back with a nail, like it was built to obey my hands, slid the microcard into a reader, and watched a different life spool across Eva's laptop. Not wire transfers to offshore anything. Not leverage. Clinic grants. Old rent receipts marked for Miss Rose's insulin in his mother's steady print. A list of students funded under the table with book stipends and NCLEX fees. Most of them from streets where you get good at running young. A memo named St. Cecile After that laid out a boring, beautiful plan to turn the club into a recovery house with night classes and an on-site nurse. The receipt numbers matched deposits from legit businesses. Dante kept quiet to keep old wolves off the scent. He wants to salt the earth, I said, meaning Kellen. If he can't own your future, he'll make sure the city laughs when you say you have one. Dante looked older and younger at once, like a son who'd finally read his mother's handwriting the way she meant it. Eva didn't say, "I told you so." She flipped into lawyer mode, hard enough to make the room sit up. "Okay. Pipeline," she said. "No poetry, no speeches. We built it out loud, so it would stand. Exhibit A, the gala audio, with Kellen talking stewardship and knowledge is leverage. Time, stamped to the second. Voice print clean. Exhibit B, the access logs with maintenance ticket or 172, jumping from facilities to finance and pinging the office during the solvent incident. Exhibit C, vendor invoices showing citrus degreaser delivered against a policy that says we don't stock it. Insert affidavits from staff about headaches and smell. Exhibit D, photos of my clear, nail, polished smear on the liquor cage, and the painter's tape X that vanished. It's small, but juries love small things that make big men look sloppy. Exhibit E, the retired fire chief's report about deliberate chemical dispersion risk in a mixed occupancy venue. Ray had him there in an hour for boudin balls and coffee. Exhibit F, the Saint Jude card, proving a consistent, documented pattern of charitable intent that explains why we wouldn't torch a future with a fake ledger. Then we stitched chain of custody, like quilters, screenshots exported with hashes, micro SD imaged with a write blocker, copies locked into envelopes signed across the seal by 3 sets of hands. We even took the cigar box to the UPS store notary, because there's nothing humbles a CFO like a brown vest world stamping your papers between fax jobs and passport photos. Kellen's white flag came with a second act, a paper letter in that same wedding font repeating his performance of concern. "It's time to heal," it read. "Let the city breathe." Under the syrup, an invitation for a quiet sit, down with compliance, and a line about how early retirement packages protect legacies. Folks who don't know better would be flattered to be handled like that. Folks who do know better hear a threat with good lighting. Theo wanted to storm somewhere on principle. I reminded him we wrote "no first strikes" in ink. He paced the porch like a caged dog until Ray showed up with an old Polaroid from the St. Cecile wall, Dante's mother on her porch, taking blood pressure. A hand, written note on the back. "We keep what we give away. Sometimes the universe mails you a sermon via trumpet player." That night, Eva filed a public records request for the maintenance tickets that mysteriously covered our hallway camera. In Louisiana, it's not FOIA, but the bones are the same. She walked our package to the parish attorney's office and left one set with a state OIG liaison who owes her 3 favors and hates grandstanding. We didn't splash it on Instagram. We didn't shout. We did the thing men like Kellen hate. We made a quiet line of dominoes that leads to a door he doesn't control. By sunrise, someone in a suit had called someone else in a suit, because Theo's phone lit up with a heads up that Mr. Ward had been invited to chat about a complaint that named him without screaming his name. He'd show. They always do. They believe rooms still open for them and can't imagine a table where their watch doesn't matter. Before we left the duplex to start moving St. Cecile's cleanup, a kid on a bike threw a newspaper onto the lawn, 2 doors down. Old. School, like the world still reads. I picked it up, and there was an ad about redevelopment fatigue. How the neighborhood's tired of promises that turn their block into ad copy. I felt it in my teeth. "If this goes public and looks like spin," I said to Dante, "we're dead before we start." He didn't flinch. "Then we don't sell it," he said. "We build it small and boring until it's undeniable." Coming from him, that was a revolution. He used to live by headlines and whispers. Now he was saying, "Make it so dull the city can nap on it." I could love that kind of dull. On our way to the club, we stopped by my mom's place with cafe au lait and a bag of beignets, because some victories deserve powdered sugar. She held my hand like it was Sunday and told me she dreamed of a porch where people didn't have to knock, then laughed at herself like she'd said something silly. When we left, Dante bought flowers from the guy who sells them illegally from a bucket in the neutral ground and tucked one under the Saint Jude chain without a word. Small things keep you human. Small things make you a target, too. But I'm learning not to be afraid of that. By afternoon, the parish investigator called Eva for a clarification on the audio and made the mistake of referring to me as the server. Eva said, "Her name is Mara Quinn, and she saved lives in your jurisdiction this week." Then paused, long enough for him to hear the indictment she didn't file yet. We didn't get cocky. We got granular. We walked St. Cecile with the retired chief, mapped airflow, circled stupidity with a Sharpie. We called the nursing school and told a department head there'd be 2 scholarships in a file soon with a note for students who work nights. Miss Laverne printed her "We Almost Messed Up" notebook as a wall of post-its and made the dish crew swear to add to it when they're wrong so the next kid doesn't drown. That evening, Theo put his phone on the table and we watched it ring with an unknown number he recognized anyway. He didn't pick up. He looked at me instead. "You built a machine," he said. Not happy, not mad, a little in awe. "We built it," I said, and I meant the whole we, me, him, Eva, Ray, Miss Laverne, the retired chief, my mother humming, the kid with the trumpet sticker. Kellen thought he sent us a white flag. Really, he sent us a measuring stick. We know our size now. We're not done, but we're not small. I used to think fire sounded like panic. Tonight, it sounded like a single glass popping in the dark and then a soft whoof, like someone exhaled gasoline. The first tendril of smoke came from the east stairwell where nothing should ever smoke. It didn't smell like old wiring. It smelled like a match daring us to blink. I didn't scream. I hit the checklist we'd taped under the host stand for exactly this nightmare. Kill the east air handler. Cut the backlights. Shut the gas at the curb. The meter key was zip, tied to the mop sink, like the retired chief told us, and close interior doors on the way out to starve the thing. Front to the sidewalk, kitchen to the alley. No heroes, no souvenirs, I said, loud enough for the room and quiet enough to make it stick. People move when you give them a job that sounds like a sentence they already know how to finish. Theo ran the center line with a towel over his mouth, directing like he'd been born with a vest and a walkie. Miss Laverne had the dish crew counting heads, staff first, customers next, and Ray lifted his trumpet and blew the calm note we'd agreed on. One long tone, every 10 seconds, so anyone still inside could move toward breath like it was music. The smoke went from gray to brown too fast, a sign of accelerant, the chief's voice in my head saying, "V. Pattern on the wall tells you where the devil started." I chalked a quick X on the office door frame to mark it cleared and pushed 2 drunk tourists through the front like laundry. Outside, the night did that New Orleans thing, where the air hugs you wrong. Sweat slid down my back and tasted like salt and worry. Dante reached the stage stairs as Theo was hustling the last table out. He looked like a man smelling his life in the smoke, eyes cut toward the wing, where the old PA hid the scuffed hardware wallet and the ghost of a plan. 60 seconds, he said, and he didn't mean for a hug. We already made that choice, I said, probably sharper than I should have. People over paper, your own rules, Rios. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Then his jaw shifted once, and the part of him that likes to kick down doors sat back in his chair. He took a breath that started in his shoes and nodded. The letting go didn't make him smaller. It made him look like he'd finally decided who he wanted to be when nobody was watching. The siren didn't come right away. That's the truth of city budgets and bad nights. Until then, it was us and a garden hose hooked to a spigot that coughed more air than water. The taqueria owner from the corner dragged over 2 dry chemical extinguishers he wasn't technically supposed to have and said, "Don't tell my insurance," then handed them to me and Theo with a shrug. A neighbor in a Dolphins jersey we've never seen sober brought out a case of water he probably couldn't afford and passed it down the line like communion. In the alley, Nico coughed till he gagged and still went back with cups, for anyone whose throat had turned to sandpaper. Small things beat speeches. I kept my feet moving and my head low and counted doors closed. People accounted for. Feelings later. 10 minutes in, longer than it should be, the first engine wailed down St. Charles, lights throwing blue ghosts up the crepe myrtles. The retired chief showed up in his church shoes, because of course he did, and he and Ray started speaking a language of angles and airflow that ordered the chaos by inches. "Keep that east hallway shut," he told me. "She's hungry. Don't feed her." Then, because men like him collect information the way the river collects stories, he added, "This has a hand on it." I nodded. I already knew. Brown smoke, fast climb, 2 ignition points if my eyes hadn't lied, while the first hose line hit the ceiling and turned the room into weather. Theo's phone buzzed, with a name he never saved but always recognized. He let it buzz once, twice, and then he thumbed the speaker because secrets rot faster in the dark. A lieutenant with a smile voice and a badge that means "Stop" for most folks said, "Stand down your people. Scene's secured. Don't complicate this." He used the word compliance like a club. Dante leaned in, and I saw the old reflex rise, grammars of threat, quick and cold. I walked my fingers across the table where we'd written our contract. One silent tap for each line he'd signed, and he looked at my hand like it was more real than the phone. Theo didn't cuss. He did the adult thing. "Lieutenant," he said, polite enough to pass inspection. "This call is being preserved under our council's instruction. Any directive outside fire command will be added to our complaint packet. Do you understand?" A beat. "Who is council?" the man asked, losing his music. "Eva Monroe," Theo said, and we all listened to a professional gambler realize the table had been switched. Eva didn't show up in a cape. She showed up in sneakers and a ponytail and went straight to the incident commander with copies of our chief's report and a 1-page preservation letter that made 3 bureaucrats put away their sarcasm. She handed me an envelope I didn't know I needed until it was in my hand. "Drone footage," she said. "Kid across the street has a hobby and a grandmother you helped last winter. He figured you needed eyes." Inside, grainy but undeniable, 2 figures in hoodies moving deliberate, one with a jug, one with a lighter. A car idling in the neutral ground with a bumper sticker from a gym Kellen loves to brag about. Faces weren't clear, but the gait was. A body man knows his principal's stride the way a nurse knows a patient's cough. Theo watched it once and said, "That's his runner, and that's not a city car." The retired chief signed a statement that said, "In essence, this ain't electrical." We dropped the package into the OIG pipeline and, for dessert, into a quiet federal inbox Eva saves for when a story needs a witness who can't be bought. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a moment where Dante wanted to angle the night a different way, swift and bloody and clean to the part of him that thinks clean means quiet. He stood on the curb with foam on his shoes, smoke in his clothes, and years of muscle memory asking for just one phone call. He looked at me like I was a cliff, and he was tired of standing on the safe side. "Give me 5 minutes," he said, voice low, as trucks groaned and neighbors filmed and the city pretended not to judge. 2, I said, and I meant he could have 2 minutes to be angry without doing something he couldn't unring. He took them. He didn't dial. Then he pulled the Saint Jude chain once, like a man ringing a bell for himself, and said, "I won't be the thing he thinks I am." That line didn't give me butterflies. It put a floor under my feet. By the time the last ember hissed and the chief said we could go inside for what wasn't drowned, the place looked like a crime scene married a shipwreck. St. Cecile's tin ceiling hung in curls. The stage was a blackened lip. The old PA was gone from the wing, stolen or melted. Didn't matter anymore. We didn't cry. We made a line and started carrying out what could be carried. A box of charts for the band kids Ray teaches on Wednesdays. Miss Laverne's ledger of we almost messed up stories. A photo from the back wall of Dante's mother with her right aid cuff and a row of neighbors waiting like church. Theo found a corner of carpet that hadn't burned, where my clear nail polish had left a shiny scar on the liquor lock weeks ago, and took a picture like a talisman. "Men burn things," Miss Laverne said, not kindly. "Women keep receipts," We all smiled, the tired kind. News didn't break that night. That was the point. A parish investigator called at dawn asking if anyone might have enemies. Like it was a fresh thought, and Eva fed him the clockwork. Audio, tickets, logs, drone, chief, chain of custody. The lieutenant's call with a transcript. You could hear a man doing the math of his next transfer. By noon, Kellen's gym posted a story about standing with small businesses against vandalism, which told me he was already running his defense. By dinner, Theo's source told us the lieutenant had been reassigned pending review, which in this town is the closest thing to a confession you're going to get without a stage. Kellen didn't show his face. People like him don't when the room stops opening. We sat on the curb while the hose water found the gutter and carried ash toward the river. Dante held the photo of his mother until his knuckles went pale, and then handed it to me like he couldn't afford to break it. I thought the fire would empty me, he said, voice scraped raw. But all I feel is lighter, not happy, not relieved, just unhitched. I lean my shoulder into his like a door you're bracing against. That's what happens when you stop dragging a past that keeps catching fire, I said. I didn't say, I'm proud of you, because that's a landmine for men like him. I said, you kept your word. He nodded like the ground had approved. I used to think the only satisfying revenge came loud. Tonight it came quiet. In a forwarded packet, a reassigned badge, a runner who stopped answering calls, a CFO who learned the city isn't his hallway. We didn't win. Not yet. But something broke that needed breaking, and we didn't have to break ourselves to do it. The club would smell like smoke for months, even after we scraped her to studs. The neighborhood would gossip and then forget. And we would build anyway. Not because we're saints, because we're stubborn. They cut the ribbon on a Saturday that smelled like fresh paint and cafe au lait, the kind of morning New Orleans gives you when it wants you to stick around. The sign read, St. Cecile Recovery House in simple letters. No script, no halo, just a promise. Neighbors brought folding chairs and church fans. The retired fire chief showed up in a saint's tie and shook every hand like he was clocking a shift. Miss Laverne ladled jambalaya into paper bowls with the same authority she uses on a Friday rush. And Ray played Amazing Grace low before sliding into a second line so the kids would dance and not think too hard about what used to stand here. Eva kept the speeches short because she knows grief gets fidgety. She read 3 lines from the bylaws and 1 from the back of a Polaroid. We keep what we give away. And that was that. Dante stepped up next. No suit, no armor, just a dark button, down, and a voice that didn't reach for applause. We made mistakes, he said. We fix what we can and build what we can't burn. It wasn't slick, which made it land. A kid I recognized from the taqueria wore the trumpet with a band aid sticker on his hoodie and dragged his grandma closer so she could hear. The clinic nurse who lifts my mother at physical therapy wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand and told me, this place feels like a door. After the crowd thinned and the brass line wandered off toward magazine, Dante handed me a small velvet box that didn't belong to a jewelry case. Inside was a simple brass key on a chain, warm from his palm, not precious, except for what it meant. I used to take what I wanted and call it survival, he said. The Saint Jude medal catching sun, where it rested against the key. I'm asking the right way. Come home with me. Hold me to what we wrote. My stomach did that roller coaster dip and then steadied. I thought about the legal pad on our bywater table, about lemon drops and porch steps and a scholarship check with my name spelled right, about what it costs a man like him to mean the words he just said. Okay, I told him, choosing my voice on purpose. On our terms, the first sign of the old life, 1 lie, 1 first strike, I walk. You won't have to guess. He nodded like he'd been waiting to hear the condition, not dreading it. Then change the locks on me, he said. Half grim, half free. We didn't kiss like a movie. We stood side by side and watched a kid in a Pelican's tee bounce a ball against the new ramp rail and miss on purpose because he didn't want to scuff it yet. Later, a 5. Second clip of Ray's horn and our paper banner made it onto a local school's morning announcements with a caption that read, "From club to clinic, people over paper." It wasn't viral. It was better. Useful. I took my mom by the next day, and she surfaced long enough to say, "This porch has good shade," like she remembered every waiting room we've ever sat in. I used to think a happy ending had to be loud. Today, it sounded like a key turning, a door opening, and a promise that wasn't poetic enough for a headline. We'll show up tomorrow and the day after, and when the city tests us, we'll keep choosing people over paper. And if we're lucky, and the boring good we make will outlive our worst days. We didn't get rescued. We changed. That's heavier and somehow lighter. That's ours.